This season has been really bad. Front, back, forward, everything. And I'm glad the Vikings are going on a bye. This bye week is exactly what the Vikings need right now. We have a huge problem, and that problem is offensive guard. A massive problem at offensive guard. I have been saying the offensive line is not causing Kirk Cousins to play this bad. It is not. It is not. Kirk Cousins doesn't realize he has legs. Kirk Cousins makes terrible decisions. Kirk Cousins can't complete a good pass. He throws a beautiful deep ball. Outside of that, I've seen nothing from Kirk Cousins this season. Our offensive line is okay. Now, you take away the guard position at all. We have Riley Reiff. Riley Reiff is playing great. Riley Reiff has lived up to his contract. Now, that is a very overpaid contract. From his stats last year, I still think they should have cut him, although he has lived up to his contract now, so I can't complain. Of course, Garrett Bradbury now being a second-year starter out of where did Garrett? I don't remember. I think North Carolina. Bradbury is having a huge step up from how he did last year, and then Brian O'Neill is a great starter for the Minnesota Vikings. Outside of that, Vikings offensive line is terrible, and I'm pointing at the offensive guards. That is being Dakota Dozier. Now, Dakota Dozier is playing okay. Dakota Dozier is a okay starter. Dakota Dozier is exceeding standards by far from what I expected to see from him. Now, him moving to left guard is a huge transition to the NFL, and it has worked great. It has worked great. At the right guard position, Pat Elflein is trash. We saw him for 1 week, and then Drew Samia came out there and was the worst offensive lineman I have ever seen in my life. I have never seen an offensive lineman play this bad like Drew Samia. He was the lowest graded offensive lineman by PFF, and that's not come by any surprise. That comes by no surprise. He has played terrible. Now, Drew Samia being injured, I will never get happy when players get injured, but I was happy to see Ezra Cleveland play. Now, of course, I was not expecting a lot from Ezra Cleveland. He was our second-round draft pick out of Boise State, I think 53 overall. He was our second-round draft pick, and it was drafted to be an offensive tackle. Now, of course, any player who is in college, any good offensive lineman is always going to be the left tackle. Always. I think all of the Minnesota Vikings offensive linemen right now were left tackles in college outside of Garrett Bradbury and Brian O'Neill. The rest of them were left tackles in college, and that's because they were the best player on the offensive line. When you have a clear stud on the offensive line in college, you play him at the left tackle position because that's the most important position. So Ezra Cleveland is built like an offensive tackle, and although we did expect to see him play offensive tackle, he's been playing a lot of snaps at the guard position because it's clear that is a big need for the Vikings and did not look good at all. Now, it was his first start in the NFL. He had a very easy matchup, I think, against Tyler Davison or something. He had a very easy matchup and didn't look good at all. He allowed a sack and did allow a few other pressures. So he didn't look good at all, but also it is his first start in the NFL. I don't expect to see him play a lot at right guard. Of course, going forward, we will see him play at right guard as long as Pat Elflein and Drew Samia are injured. I hope to see, even if Drew Samia is healthy, that Ezra Cleveland starts over him. Even though we saw Ezra Cleveland play bad, he is still light years better than Drew Samia. A lot better than Drew Samia. I don't think he's going to be a great starter. I feel like, we have to give him time. Only time will tell what Ezra Cleveland's future will look like. But as of right now, I do think he will be a guard. I do think they will move him to guard, and he will be a guard going forward. Because, of course, Riley Reiff, we have to get out of that contract eventually. When we pay Kirk Cousins this much money, we got to get out of Riley Reiff's contract. I don't know if that means cutting him. I don't think any of his money is guaranteed right now, so you can cut Riley Reiff after the season. Although he is having a great season, you can cut him because the Vikings are in need of a rebuild right now. Dakota Dozier is very replaceable. He is 30-some years old, was drafted in the 4th round by the New York Jets, I think in 2014, I think Dakota Dozier was drafted. So he is very replaceable. Outside of that, going forward, I do think Pat Elflein will continue to be our starting right guard or left guard. We saw him at left guard in 2019, and he looked so bad, so I expect to see him at right guard. You hate to see it. You hate to see it because Pat Elflein had a great rookie season. Pat Elflein looked great. And then he comes out and looks terrible. He will continue to be our starter, though. He will continue to be our starter because the team loves him, and he had a great season, and for some reason, Rick Spielman refuses to ever bench players. He didn't even bench Drew Samia after starting the 4 worst games I've ever seen in the NFL. Doesn't even look like he should be in the NFL, let alone a starting right guard. And he didn't even bench Drew Samia. It didn't come by a surprise because Rick Spielman does not bench players. It's just not his thing. Or Mike Zimmer. I guess this would be Mike Zimmer's decision, not Rick Spielman. This would be Mike Zimmer's decision. He did not bench Drew Samia. Pat Elflein was still out there. Again, Ezra Cleveland is still light years better than Drew Samia. I can't say Pat Elflein. Of course, we have seen some good games from Pat Elflein. Outside of that, he's played awful also. But he will continue to be our starter. He will continue to be our starter. Riley Reif, we got to get out of that contract somehow. Dakota Dozier, he is very replaceable, even though he has had a great season so far. He is a very replaceable left guard, and Vikings got to really revamp that offensive line. Outside of that, the Vikings offensive line is not terrible. It is not terrible. We have terrible players on the offensive line. Ezra Cleveland is looking awful. I mean, it was his first start in the NFL. We can't grade someone off of their first start in the NFL, although we can say that he is already better than Drew Samia because I can be better than Drew Samia. And I weigh 150 pounds. And I can be better than Drew Samia. That guy looked terrible. Anyways, outside of that, I do expect Ezra Cleveland to be our left guard, maybe some year. Dakota Dozier will be a free agent in 2021, and I don't expect them to give him another contract because like we see, all of these players are leaving. All these players have got to go because if you are over the age of 30 and play for the Vikings, you are at risk of being on the free agent market next year because Vikings got to go full rebuild. It is a huge need. Vikings got to draft a left guard also. Vikings got to make some plays for offensive lineman and quarterback in this next year's draft because we are going full rebuild. On the defensive side of the ball, those players just need some time to develop. That's all they need is time to develop. Don't need to invest much draft capital there. On the offensive line and quarterback, you need to get those players. That needs to be your main focus in next year's draft as you rebuild. Let me know what y'all think.